Hello, welcome to the Hyper Query Workshop. This is part three of the three-part data service workshop series. In this workshop, we will explore some advanced features of the Hyper Data Service, particularly query and bulk. To follow along with this workshop, go to hyper63/workshops. This workshop is in DENO, but if you use Gitpod, you'll be able to run the workshop in the um, cloud development environment. So the previous two workshops, we basically went through all of the basic features you need in a data service, the ability to add data, the ability to get data out, the ability to update data and remove data, as well as list data. But you also need to do a little bit more. Um, Hyper's data service encourages a single table design architecture where you put all your documents in one service and you use properties like type and prefixed identifiers to identify your documents instead of creating multiple tables or multiple data services for each document type. And this works really well. It allows you to query multiple types together, in effect, creating kind of a join kind of uh, functionality with the ability to scale horizontally. So you get high scale without that expensive kind of relational design. So with that, you have the ability to do queries. And Hyper's data service uses a query syntax very similar to MongoDB or CouchDB's Mango query syntax, but basically it's a object, and you have operators like $EQ for equals, or $GT for greater than, or $or for $and for and, things like that. So to follow along in this workshop, you need to know about HTTP JSON APIs, JavaScript, and you should have a GitHub account. And again, in this workshop, we'll be using DENO. And let's go ahead and launch our Gitpod environment. And you can do that by doing https gitpod.io pound https github.com hyper63 workshops. And you log in with your GitHub account and you're off to the races. And while that is spinning up, we'll go to the Hyper Developer dashboard and we'll create an app if you haven't created one. I'm going to use the app I created earlier today. And once you create that app, then you want to grab the connection string. So I'm going to grab it by doing this. And to create an app, all you have to do is click add application. So I have 3 apps already, so I can't add one. But if you log in to dashboard.hyper.io, you'll see this application screen and you'll see a button called add application. You click it, make sure data is checked, and then click create. And then you can go into your application and copy your connection string. Now, what we want to do is go into our Visual Studio Code and go to the data query folder and create a new file .env. And then in that .env file, we're going to type hyper equals and paste that connection string in. And that's going to let our server know um, what's going on. Okay. So it'll let our server know the environment variable hyper, which will give us access to this connection string for the hyper service. Um, the next thing we want to do in a terminal, and I'm going to close this terminal and this one, and then I'm going to go to data query here and I'm going to right click and say open integrated terminal. And all that is a nice shortcut where it'll open to the data query directory. And I'm going to run scripts slash setup.sh. And all that's going to do is set up our data service for this um, workshop. So everything looks like it worked okay. We've got some characters, some games, and appearances. And the characters, if you were in the previous workshop, they're Mario characters. Games will be Mario games. And appearances is a document that contains a game identifier and a character identifier. So we can use that document to kind of list all the characters that are in a game or list all the games that a character is in. Kind of this many to many relationship. So that's super cool. We've done that. Now, the next thing we need to do is start up our API server. So we're just going to do scripts start.sh and just make sure you're in data query and we should be up and running. And I'm going to create a new terminal window. And I'm just going to try out some curl commands. So curl localhost 3000 API. Let's just try games. Okay, cool. We get all the games. Now let's try characters. Okay, cool. We get all the characters. Very, very cool. So now that we're set up and we've got our server, we want to talk about query and bulk. Um, bulk is a cool command. It allows you to take an array of documents and essentially send them to your data service all in one command. So kind of a bulk load. But it also does more. You can also update documents and you can delete documents within that bulk. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, the query. As we continue to build our API, we want to provide the ability to find all the characters that made an appearance in the Mario Universe game. For example, which characters made an appearance in Donkey Kong? In our data store, we have characters and we have games, and each of these document types have unique identifiers. And we have another document type called appearances. These documents contain the game identifier and the character identifier to associate the characters with the games. Since a character can appear in multiple games and a game can have more than one character, we need a special document type that maps these associations. In our setup, we created some associations so that we could get started. In our API, we're going to create a new endpoint called characters underscore query. When the developer sends a post with the game ID specified, we will need to return all the characters for that. So here's an example. If we send post API characters underscore query, game ID equals game ID 1. So let's go ahead and write that out. Curl localhost. I think we're going to post. So we want to do x post localhost 3000 slash API slash characters slash query. And we're going to use a URL parameter, game ID equals game 1, right? So that's what we want to implement. If we run it now, it's not found, which means it's not implemented. Okay, so we need to implement it. We can see that we need to create a post function, and I think we need to do that in the API characters query.js file. So we go and use Command P and say query JS file in API characters, right? Okay. So we've got a post functions that's not implemented. Now, in this workshop, so before we were typing like import connect from hyperconnect, and then we were instantiating hyper. In this workshop, we're removing some of that redundancy, I think. Let's go to server, data query. Yes, so in the server, we're importing connect, and then we're creating a little bit of middleware. So in the middleware, we're creating our hyper instance, and then we're attaching it to the request object here in the middleware. So what that does is that just every time we implement a handler, we can just pick the hyper instance off of the request object without having to do import and connect every single time. And that makes our code cleaner, and it puts our connection um, functionality in one place and our grab of the environment variable in one place, and just overall nicer API. In the previous workshops, we wanted to kind of be explicit to kind of show what you're doing, and now we're leveraging um, Express middleware or Opine middleware to inject the hyper service into our handler. So when this request comes in, we're going to have a couple of things. We're going to have the hyper instance that we want to grab, and we're going to have query params. So we want to get the query instance, right? And this query will have game ID as a property, game underscore ID. So we're going to want to query hyper and get some result. So we say await hyper.data.query. And query takes two arguments. It takes a selector, and then it takes some options like limit and other things. So with the query, we're going to add our selector, and we're going to say we want the type to be appearance, as we want to get all the appearances of for all the characters that appeared in this particular game. So uh, the type would be appearance, and then the game um, and I think it's .game.id. So what it is a nested object. So game.id will be equal to query dot game ID, like that. And I think that should work. We'll spit out the result, and it's no longer a 501. Okay. So the query, like the list, will return an object that'll have an OK, true or false, and then it will have docs. So hopefully we'll see some docs in this. And we don't. So what did I do wrong? Post query. Message not found. Maybe I need to restart my server. Maybe it's not running reload, which is quite possible. Um, let's see. Okay, so I think we don't have our handler set up. Nope. So we need to handle this. So we'll say import post as query characters. From API characters slash query.js. Okay. And then we'll add our handler here. It's going to be at.post, oops, slash API slash characters underscore query. And we want to query characters. Okay. Now let's see if we get better results. Sweet. So we got for the characters underscore query, where game1 equals game1, we get these appearance documents. And let's just prettify them for a second so we can see. So each appearance document has a game property and a character property. So what we could do with these results, if we just want to list the characters, is just pluck out the character property for each one of these docs and return that, right? Um, and we don't even need to worry about the appearance ID. We just can return the character, and we have the name. So if we don't need any other data, then we can just return the ID and name, and that will like populate a drop down, right? Where you have the character ID and name, or populate a list. So let's go ahead and do that. So once we get the result, we get docs, and we can basically map over the documents, and we'll get a single doc, and then we'll just return doc.character like that. And so what that should do is kind of pluck out that character property, and now we should just get a list of characters. Cool. So in Donkey Kong, we have one character, Mario. Now, don't know if we have any other appearances, but maybe. Cool. So in game two, we have two characters, Mario and Luigi. Um, so that's pretty cool. And basically, this selector, we said we want to get the documents where type equals appearance and game.id equals query.gameID. Now, you can do all kinds of things with selectors. You can do an or, so you could say where game ID equals game ID and wrap that in an array with or, and let's just try that. So $ or, take an array, right? And we can do and this will be an object. Another object, game ID, and we'll say, let's just say game one, right? Now, this is going to return two appearance documents, so it should show like Mario twice, and it does. Okay. Um, so that's kind of the or, and you could do like less than and greater than, and use limit for pagination stuff. You can do equal, not equal. There's all kinds of operators you can do. And you can see a list of them in our documentation. So we open up in a new window, but you can't see that. Um, Open up in a new tab, which then you can see. Okay. So you can see here's all the selectors exist, in, not in, etc. So pretty cool. One note is the regex will not capture any indexes that are created. So that's going to always be a scan. So you want to avoid that. Same thing with the in operator. It will scan. So you don't want to have a long list where you're doing an in operator in. There's some other things to think about. Um, but yeah, that's it. That's kind of the query interface, and like I said, you can um, you know really uh, be very concise on what kind of data you would like to return. Um, there's a create index or index command where you can build an index and make sure that every time you query that um, it comes back in a very performant way, no matter how many records are in the data store. So that's pretty cool. There's other options like fields. You can limit the amount of fields you would like to return. So in this case, instead of using this map down here, we could just say fields, and then we provide an array and say, you know what, we just want to return the character field. And if we run that, we just get the character field. Um, it is, kind of nested deep in there. So you might want to still pluck it out, but that's pretty cool. And then you have sort, so you can sort by properties by giving an array of objects, and you would specify descending or ascending limit, and use index. You can specify an index that you created to optimize that. So you may want to take a minute and, now that we've created the characters by game ID, use the same kind of formula to go to API games underscore query and create a list of games by character ID, right? So give that a shot. And then bulk. So refactor, update characters games. So let's use the bulk feature to add more characters and games. We'll create a new file called bulk.js. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll just, in our data query, create a new file called bulk.js. And this new file, we're just going to load some data. So it's pretty easy. We're going to create this data array. And I'm just going to copy it because that's a lot of typing. So we'll just paste that in. And now we've got this data array. And now we can, kind of import hyper. And we're also importing this .env so that we can read the .env file here. So this .env will read that in, and now we can create this hyper instance, and now we can just call hyperdata bulk, and what it's going to do is it's going to essentially add all of this data into our data store. So we can log it out and just call await hyper data bulk data like that. And if we run it, um, we want to um, use our import map JSON file so that it can understand everything. And then we're just going to say we approve all of the things using the A, and also unstable because we've got some unstable modules which work fine. But let's just run this DENO command. Oh, it's DENO run. So almost right. Need to update the README, but DENO run. Uh, and I need to be in that folder. So CD data query. We'll get there eventually. So now DENO run, and it's going to grab the bulk.js file, and boom, it's added three more characters, a couple of games, and an appearance document. And the nice thing is the bulk is item potent. So if the data already exists, it's just going to update it. If you wanted to delete data, you could just go in here and let's delete game 12. So we can just say deleted true, right? And then what it's going to do is delete game 11. Okay. And let's just make sure curl localhost 3000 API games, game 11, not found. Okay. Now if we take deleted true off, then it will add it back, etc. So all that's pretty cool. Bulk is super helpful for seeding your development environment or seeding other workflow environments. And uh, yeah, it's a pretty cool feature. Um, let's see what else we have on this workshop. The other thing with bulk is you can like remove all related things when you need to remove something. So if you have a delete function where you're deleting a game, you may want to remove all the appearance documents that that game is related to. So here's some code example you could try to do that, where we're basically getting the appearances for game ID, and getting those documents, and then we're adding the deleted flag, then we're passing them to the bulk, and then we remove the game one. So that's a great way to do kind of a cascading delete by composing the bulk and query methods with the remove method. Um, Pretty cool stuff. So we looked at a couple of advanced features with hyper data, and hopefully you got an idea of how to use those. And what we'll start to look at next is our cache service. So we kind of covered the data service at a entry level, and the next thing we want to do is look at how we can leverage the cache service to do things like creating hot counters and really fast reads when accessing um, data documents. So hope you enjoyed this workshop, and please let me know if you have any comments or questions. Thanks.